Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're with us. Broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan's engineering the broadcast at GCN. I'm Vin Finelli. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. And that's between the hours of 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. That's when we're live. 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to listen 24/7, you can bring us with you on your phone. 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. It's always an honor to be on your show.
It's delightful to be broadcasting with you, Rich. Hey, I had a question for you. So you've been off the air for a couple weeks. We missed you. And so what has Rich Scheben been up to?
Well, I had to do a few talks over in Washington State. And, when you live off-grid and you have a hobby farm, there's certainly not a short list of chores to do. But I had to go out of town for several days, and there's a lot of people who are interested in hearing outside-the-box ideas when it comes to self-sufficiency. I gave several talks on finance and economy and what the people need to expect. And I basically put the blame on demographics, central banks, Keynesian economic theory, and group identity politics. And I show people and prove to people with evidence and examples how we're in a deflationary spiral with stagflationary consequences for the middle class. And as you know, I call the middle class the bottom 93% because of the fact that we are losing control over our own destiny. And there is a coup on the bottom 93% to govern ourselves. So this hybrid disaster is such a rigging of the game that everything about our future financial economic system is regarding the word speculation and hedging, and people are looking for ideas. They're looking for solutions. And that's where I come in and give examples on how we can compete with this technocracy regarding robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, and everything that's all this exported inflation to low-cost producing countries and what we can do about it.
You know, it's interesting you say that, talk about deflation. I've noticed that the price of solar panels has come down about 50%, 50%, half of what it was a couple years ago. Easily. So I see it. I see some things going up, and I see some things coming down. And I see a nonstop barrage of ads. If I do a search on something, like if I type in nickel iron batteries, I will get a barrage of advertisements for nickel iron batteries. If I do a search on a vise, I want to buy a vise, a machinist vise for the shop or the barn. I get nonstop ads from Sears. Get your vise here, nonstop. And so when you talk about deflationary, we're talking about prices coming down, some prices coming down, and we're also talking about the scarcity of purchasing, people not buying things. So ads have become really, really significant in trying to drive us to buy things that we might not otherwise buy. I did a search on a garden hose from Sears. They had a lifetime warranty garden hose. And I bought one back, a couple decades ago, and I think it's a pretty darn good hose. Well, it's 50 feet, and it's $50 normal price. But you can get one at Sears on sale for $19.99. For a lifetime hose, as long as Sears is around, that's a great way to go. It's rubber. It's not as good as the old one. It's not as good as the one they made 20 years ago. I'd rather have more of the ones that we had 20 years ago, but it's black rubber, and it's got heavy connections on the end, heavy fittings, but it's $20. Now, $20 for a lifetime warranty hose is pretty low in price, I think. It's a commercial-grade hose, or almost commercial. So I'm seeing what you're saying, absolutely for sure. And also, I'm seeing gas prices. Gas prices are pretty low, relatively speaking. The average price in Missouri right now is $2.04 for the regular. Lowest price in Missouri is $1.84. In the Springfield, Missouri market, it's $1.95. So gas prices are coming down in our neck of the woods. So I'm seeing what you're saying, and people are hurting. There's no question about it. Now, the top 3%, I don't think they're hurting at all. They might not even know what's going on. But the rest of us, we feel it.
Absolutely. You look at demographics, debt, credit, pensions, valuations, everything's a headwind for future rates of growth. And it's not just household debt, but corporate debt, global debt, government promises. And this is why your show is so popular, Vince, is because people need to know what's going on and how to prepare. And, even Henry Kissinger said, when you control the money, you control the world. And if the elites get their way, this fascist system that we already have around the Western world is going to continue and get much worse. And basically, we're going to have 1984 on steroids. And, people always say, well, look at food, water, healthcare, rent, college, tuition, insurance, taxes, lumber in certain areas. I mean, there is a handful of things going up dramatically. But you look at healthcare and college, insurance, these have all been bailed out and subsidized by the federal government or us, the taxpayers. So this hybrid disaster that's been created is far from supply and demand and free markets. Now, there are certain things, like you mentioned, gas. People are broke. The bottom 93% are not just broke. They're scared, and they don't know what to do. And Thomas Jefferson warned us. He said that banks were much worse than standing armies. Well, now we have central banks all around the world who are in cahoots and printing money at the same time and buying stocks, buying debt from other countries, buying bonds. We're living in a financial fantasy world where common sense and logic has been sold out. So this is why we got to talk about ideas and solutions for the American people so people can understand it. And I don't say that in a condescending way. But when people understand Economics 101, I promise you there will not be any socialist, communist dictatorships or tyranny allowed in this world. Because if we all understood the basic principles of economics, we will see how we are being used by group identity politics to lower the bars of standards and expectations under a system with different rules, laws, and accountabilities based on what group you are. This insults the work ethic, the ability, and the intelligence of all these people put in these groups. In other words, it's degrading and disrespecting people to make submission and break your will. And when you reward mediocrity for decade after decade after decade, like we've been doing, we're destroying our country, America. Ingenuity, productivity, and innovation is only available for the top few percent, and definitely not for the bottom 93%. So we have to work our way out of this with information so people can understand what they need to do for plan B, C, D, and E. Vince?
As you were saying that, I was thinking back into the 1990s. And during that period, I was teaching a class in high school. My title was CEO of a company within a school system. And so I was actually running an enterprise, teaching young students how to manufacture computers. And the reason, this is all germane to the discussion. The reason I did this was I was at a high school graduation at the high school in our little county in rural Virginia. And I watched the students march across stage, if you will, and receive their diploma. And then I saw them throw their caps up in the air, toward the end of the ceremony. And then I saw the looks on their faces, after, and it's like, uh-oh, now what do we do? There are no jobs. The structure of my life is gone. All the congratulations were winding down in the auditorium. And I saw this, and I thought, well, what can I do to help? And I decided to give our computer manufacturing company to the school system. And I was brought on to be a teacher. So I was teaching how to manufacture computers. Now, the reason for this was to show the students how they could start their own business, their own small business. And they needed to know about customers, they needed to know about ethics, they needed about morals and values and profit and loss and economics, insurance, working with people. And these are just high school students who have never done anything like that before. And this is not the big city. This is rural America. So I did that. And then I decided to rewrite the curriculum for the high school in terms of the business department. And what I thought we needed to do was get back towards something more akin to teaching everybody home economics. And that's where back in the 1950s and the 1960s, the girls would go into home economics and they'd learn how to clean and iron and run the household and, pay the bills. And they would learn the basics of running the household, keeping it clean and cooking, everything you could think of to run a household, which I think, we've pushed that down so it's not important. No, it's very important. Raising children is probably the most important, if not the most important thing a woman can do, taking care of the family. And so I approached the superintendent of schools, and I said, here are my thoughts. And it was, on one page. I said, I believe that we need to institute something like home economics. And on the school campus of the high school, there was a house. It was a brick house that was built just to teach home economics. So it had everything. It had places to wash dishes. It had a stove and everything you'd want to have in a home in order to teach young people how to operate and manage a home. And I said, we need to get back toward that. But in addition to that, everybody needs to understand home economics. Everybody, men and women. And I believe we need to teach the principles of finance, the principles of economics, the principles of banking, the principles of insurance, and the principles of interest, how all that works. Because what's happening is young people are buying things no money down. They think no money down means we'll never have to pay for it. And then no interest for a year. They think we'll never have to pay interest. This is great, free stuff. And I wanted them to understand that's not true. It's not free stuff. And it's the path to disaster, which is what you've been talking about, debt. And they said, no, we can't do it. We're not going to do that. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com, offgridmontana.com. Rich, do you remember, years ago when there was like the upper middle class, and then there was the middle class, and what's going on? Oh, geez. Oh, boy, it looks like we're having some digital dropouts. It looks like it's stabilized right now. By the way, Rich, if I get disconnected, if you just continue, I'll reconnect. It might take a minute or so, but
Okay.
The problem is the digital side. It's not the AC, alternating current side. By the way, let me just get back to the middle class. I remember back in the 60s, when even the 70s, when there was the discussion that, there was the lower class, people who were homeless and so forth, and then there was the upper class, and then in the middle there was the middle class, but then within the middle class there was the lower middle class, the middle class, and the upper middle class, and it was it was something. It was the American dream to be in the middle class. The reason for that, you could aspire, you could work hard, and you could help build some reserves. It might have been called wealth. Didn't mean rich. It meant you might have some reserves and maybe get that little trailer in the driveway that might have a fishing boat or something like that on it, or you might be able to do some things that were nice. Maybe get a window air conditioner, and improve the lifestyle. And that was something that was aspired to. But now it's kind of tough. It really is. I look at young people today. I'm trying to think, what are they thinking about? Are they thinking they actually can get ahead? Do they really believe it? And do they think that going to college and getting a really good education is going to help them? Or do they think that's just way overpriced and it's just going to put them behind in so much debt that they won't get ahead? There's so many things to think about. And young people today, I really don't envy their position. I really don't. Not that they're meeting it head on with lots of intestinal fortitude, but it's a tough row to hoe for them because the opportunities are getting fewer and farther between. I'm thinking about a lot of things. It's kind of a run-on sentence right now, but I was thinking in high school. After school, I had the honor of having an after-school job at the local sub shop, and it was an honor, to be hired. It was a position of trust where you would actually handle another person's cash, if you will, coming across the counter. And it was a wonderful experience. But how many of our young people can aspire to being trained by an independent entrepreneur, a small businessman that's not part of a chain, where you learn from the boss rather than learn from a manager at a McDonald's who really doesn't know that much anyway, right? So life is different. I think years ago we had some advantages that we don't have now. But it wasn't easy either. You actually had to work, and you had to perform, and you had to be better than the other guy in most instances to get ahead, right? You couldn't get ahead by doing a lousy job. You couldn't get ahead all the time on who you knew. What are your thoughts?
Well, boy, you threw a lot out there, but I'm just going to go for it, Vince.
Yeah.
First of all, back in our day, hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications, and criteria of that type used to get us ahead and get us a career and get us prosperity and comfort zones. And now, because of things like I just mentioned, demographics, central bank corruption, manipulation, Keynesian economics, which is basically elite interventionism, if I had to define it in two words, and mostly group identity politics, because of political correctness, has created a system where common sense and logic has literally been replaced by corruption, manipulation, nepotism, and about 1,000 different veils disguised as subsets under political correctness. You mentioned earlier, and I'd like to address what you said. You mentioned ethics, morals, and values. I'll be honest with you; they mean nothing. And I say that not to be, revengeful or condescending or have a certain stance against the American people, but I have three base criteria that stand for principle, and that is we need to have the same rules, laws, and accountability based on. That should just be the bottom line. Well, the powers that be have, through divide and conquer strategies, lowering the bars of standards and expectations, have created a separate tiered system of rules, laws, and accountability based on aristocracy, serfdom, skin pigmentation, gender, sexual orientation, religion, ideology. We have to go back to what made America great, Vince.
Let me tell you about a guy by the name of Bob Gigante. His on-air name was Bob Grant, WOR radio, in New York City. I used to listen to him on Skip. And I'll tell you what he said. Rich Scheben is with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, I used to listen to a guy on the radio. His name was Bob Gigante. That was his real name. And his radio name was Bob Grant. He'd been on the air for 50 years before he died. And I think he died at about 84 years old. He was really, really good. He was very, very conservative, and he offended a lot of people on the radio. And one of the things that he said that got him fired, and it was about an African-American woman. And she was angry with the police, and here's what he said. That she got her high-profile job at a radio station. This was in 1979. He said, I'll tell you how. She passed the gynecological and pigmentation test. That's how. That's the quote. I will tell you how. She passed the gynecological and pigmentation test. That's how. That's what he said. Got him fired. And I believe that's what you're talking about, special rules for certain groups of people. And it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong, because I didn't have any advantages. As a matter of fact, I had disadvantages because I'm a white guy, and I was unable to get into the university of my first choice, of which my father was a graduate, which I had family friends who wrote me letters of recommendation. It didn't matter, because at that point in time they were evening up the statistics, so that if you were a minority, you got way, way, way more preferential treatment than anybody else. As a matter of fact, I couldn't get in no matter what. So it actually was a good thing. It really was, because I went to a better university. And And it all worked out just fine. But I do remember this young man coming to the gas station where I was pumping gas one summer, just before college, between high school and college, and he had the university sticker on his back window of his vehicle. And I asked him about it, and he said he was going to the university. I asked him how he did on the test, and he said, "What test?" Yep. That's how it works.
Yep.
And then, Rich, I think I've even mentioned before that when I had a job in banking, we hired this gal, and she was in charge of human research, also known as human resources, and we were talking about affirmative action, and I didn't understand it. Like, what is affirmative action? And she said that, well, you know, it's we reach out to people who might not ordinarily know about us. And I'm thinking, well, I knew about us. That's how I got here. And everyone else I knew that worked at this corporate headquarters of the bank got here because they knew about us. We didn't go out and send a search party looking for people saying, hey, what do you think about banking? You want to come and join corporate headquarters? That's okay if you don't know anything about banking. It's all right. We'll teach you everything you need to know. You know, that's not how it goes. I mean, I had to study for years, 6 years, formally in finance and economics to get the job that I had in banking. And so what she said was, you know, we're going to place advertisements in magazines that are going to reach out to people who might not ordinarily know about us. I said, like what? She said, well, like Ebony. I said, really? Ebony? Well, what about an ad in the New York Times or something like that, you know, that reaches everybody? So I've witnessed firsthand exactly what you're talking about. And has it made me a better person? Yeah, because I had to work even harder.
Well, Vince, if I may address that, what the bottom line is for what the elites are doing, this is their playbook, their flow chart for the destruction of America. And what they have successfully done is turned the United States of America into the divided groups of America. And this is done on purpose by design. And this is why I always say that the MO of the elites is to distract, dump down, and divide us by every group possible. Race, gender, sex, religion, ideology, generation, which they're working on now, and trying to get the young people against the old people. And this is why half of the questions coming out of the mainstream media is about race baiting and gender baiting and sex baiting. It's because they need to call us these politically correct buzzwords like racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, and basically all the things that they are, and tenfold compared to the average American. So the MSM, 5 companies, it's not just TV, radio, magazines, newspapers, it's production companies, it's publishing companies. Their job is to sway public opinion. They need to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, ideology. That's why they try so hard to hold on to the narratives, the memes, the themes, the talking points, and the microphone, because they realize that the American people are waking up to this scam. In fact, I think I've quoted Ben Carson, or paraphrased him many times on your show. He came to Northwest Montana and spoke. He says, I hate political correctness. When you're politically correct, you turn minorities into victims. So this is why the system is made to do this, to disrespect certain groups, degrade certain groups, and insult the work ethic, the ability, and the intelligence. When you say this group can't compete, this group's work is suboptimal, you don't empower a nation or a group by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. This is totally meant to make the people submissive and break our will. And then they go after you as an individual and demonize, discredit, and delegitimize. This is why when I stand for principle, I say the same rules, laws, and accountability. You have to be willing to be hated for telling the truth in lieu of wanting to be liked for blowing smoke of someone's keister. And if someone else does it with less consequences for their actions because of their group, then you do it too. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. But free speech is a great example. And they're saying, well, only the elites or colleges or certain people who toe the agenda line for the end results of what I just mentioned can have free speech and other people can't. Well, this is a bunch of crap. We need to be thinkers, and they are cultivating basically followers. We need to be independent thinkers. And this is why I try to come up with ideas and solutions, Vince, for the average Joe, which is the bottom 93% of Americans, to think outside the box with new ideas. I mean, you mentioned college. a few times just in the last few minutes. I think I've mentioned this on the air, my opinion of college. And I got 3 college degrees, so for you young people going to college, don't take this personally, but to me, 90% of college degrees are totally worthless. It's a time leverage loss. In other words, when you're young, you should be buying equity like houses and land. And what I mean by time leverage is you pay into principal for that loan. You basically balance out your assets and liabilities with equity in your home, and you create time leverage early. Well, because you have so much school debt, a lot of kids are being forced to live with their parents, especially when you look at the amount of jobs being taken by artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation, and the fact that we have literally imported deflation and exported inflation to low-cost producing countries and the other corrupt entities like central banks and Keynesian economics and group identity politics, never mind demographics, that's holding you back. And it's not just the baby boomers retiring. Baby boomers retiring en masse should be great for the young people because it should create job availability. Well, what's happening because of what I just mentioned, the 15 to 54-year-olds, which is supposed to be the mass working group in America, there's hardly any good jobs left for them. Now, let me share some of the social indoctrination things that I've read regarding colleges. I think I've mentioned this on your show before, Vince, but this is almost like a comedy hour. I think your listeners will get a kick out of it in a sad way. But Purdue University said pro-lifers who believe fetuses are humans is that, and I'm quoting here, butt naked body of a child is child porn. Clemson University, expecting certain people to be on time is racist. University of California, chill zones where mats and beanbag chairs are available for naps. University of Michigan, Trump derangement syndrome, so they enlist services of psychologists in a room full of Play-Doh and bubbles. I'm not making this stuff up, folks. University of Arkansas, eliminate C grades and start grades at B- level. Several universities around the country says the American flag is a symbol of hate. College students are intimidated by masculine wood paneling. Certain universities are hiring social justice warriors to tattletale on their fellow students when they have certain types of speech. And this is things you don't hear in the mainstream media because they want to hold on to the narratives. If you ever look at late-night news, it's all satire and banter. It's to be derogatory against conservatives. It's to teach young people to scream, to yell, to chant. And that's why I mentioned the Lewis and Clark story, which was the first time they voted when they got to the Pacific Ocean with York the black slave and Sacagawea the female Indian. Not only did everybody vote, but they said why. But see, we are digressing. We're regressing to the point where the elites are telling young people to yell, scream, and chant. In other words, they are indoctrinating them to be independent followers and not independent thinkers. And we have to go back to the Lewis and Clark days and say, hey, this was a milestone. We had a black man voting and a female Indian voting, but they said why we should literally camp on the Pacific Ocean and not just raise their hand to vote. This is what we need to do. So college, to me, is basically useless. Everything has a law of diminishing returns, whether it be political correctness, whether it be the printing of money, whether it be Keynesian economics, whether it be group identity politics. Have you never noticed, Vince, that the powers that be in the mainstream media don't say group identity politics? When they do say it, they say identity politics because they want to mask with Hegelian dialectic and professional wordsmithing and media propaganda all the things that's really going on. And people are waking up to this, and I think we need to start really saying it like it is and creating ideas and solutions for the American people to fix their economy and their lives. Because they've all been used. Every group out there has been used to poison us against ourselves, America.
Rich Sheben's with us. When we come back, I'd like to address what you said about time equity and how I handle that in our families' lives. We'll be right back. OffGridMontana.com. Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, you mentioned time equity, and let me just share a couple thoughts with you. When I was in banking, I worked full time as a banking employee. I was designing computer systems, and I decided that I would like to be a little more financially independent, because if you have a job and if you have a mortgage note and you're starting a family, if you get fired or laid off, that whole thing could come tumbling down, everything that you've worked for. So I decided that I would like to ensure financial independence somehow. And I learned about this method. I went to a seminar. I learned about buying real estate and becoming a real estate investor. So what I did was I bought a small multifamily house, and it was empty. And I ripped out the kitchen and did plumbing, electrical, sheetrock, put in kitchen cabinets. I mean, when I talk about doing that, I mean I did that. I don't mean I hired it. I mean I did it. And so I did that. The first month I bought one building, and then I realized that actually when I went to buy the building, I bid on it and put an offer in, and it was accepted. And I realized it was not the right one. And then I found one I thought was better, so I bought that one. And then I found the right one. So what happened was I actually bought 3 apartment buildings / single-family houses or multifamily houses in the same month. And I started renovating them, and right after work, I would get in my El Camino with my tools, and I would start working on these at night. And I renovated them, got them all rented, and it worked out really fine. And I kept doing this for about 11 more, a total of 11 buildings. And so I put my time in and turned it into equity. So what happened was the tenants were paying for the financial maintenance, if you will, the financial upkeep, the financial ownership of these buildings, and they were growing at the market rate. So they were covering the costs. I was doing the hard work of renovation, and the buildings were appreciating. And it worked. It actually worked. And so that's one way that you can do it. And it still can be done today if you're in the right location, and if the location is growing, and if you don't have too much interest, and if you're willing to do the work yourself. I think it can still be done. And it worked for me. And another thing I'd like to share with you is we talked about college degrees. And it looks like we had a dropout. I hope we didn't lose too much. Looks like we lost a couple seconds. College degrees. I think they're a good starting point. I think one of the things that you need to have a skill in is communication. You need to know the English language, and you need to, at least around here, and you need to be able to communicate effectively and well with people. And if you can do that without college, that's great. But in my college pursuits, I worked for a very large industrial giant before working for the government and before working for bank. And this industrial giant had a tuition reimbursement plan. And if you were an employee and you got the approval of your boss, they would pay 90% of your college course. And I read the policy, and there was no limit. No limit. So what I did was I decided to go to school full-time at night for my master's degree. So for 18 months, I would leave the corporate giant. I'd race to the university. I'd study every day, take the tests, and I worked full-time and went to school full-time. And they paid 90% of my college tuition, which was like giving myself a 50% raise. A 50% raise on what they were paying me anyway. And that broke the record. As a matter of fact, it caused them to change policy, where they then limited college reimbursement to 2 courses. You could only take 2 a year instead of 60 credits in 18 months. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you, Rich. And yes, you can do it. It's not easy, but yes, it can be done. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Here we go. Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. And if you'd like to take us with you as you travel telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Offgridmontana.com. And you can buy his book right there at offgridmontana.com, as well as Amazon. Rich, I mentioned time and equity. Did you have any comments on that last hour?
Well, I certainly don't agree with anything you said, but the rules have definitely changed.
Wait, you don't agree?
No, I do agree with everything you said, but the rules have changed. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let me tell your listeners what has happened over the last 40 years and has gotten so much worse. We've been force-fed a sandwich, a Marxist, Alinsky, Frankfurt School, Cloward and Piven, Communist Manifesto, drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness sandwich. And what this has done, it's set the stage for government interventions, confiscation, redistribution of wealth, mostly by group identity politics. And what the bottom line is we have a loss of individual rights. So I'll just take one of the examples you mentioned regarding time leverage on rentals. And it's a great idea, especially if you're young. However, I'm 57, folks. So I looked into, I sold a piece of property last year. I looked into buying a threeplex, okay, in my county. And it was quite reasonable. It was somewhere, I don't know, $150,000, $200,000 in that range. And I was going to pay for it with cash. And I did the math. I broke out the pencil and the paper. And I talked to attorneys. I talked to title companies. I talked to a lot of people and did my research. And the bottom line is if I had 100% occupancy, full occupancy, if I never got sued because of group identity politics, if I never had a plumbing or electrician issue, if I didn't have someone go crazy and destroy the place or go on fire, if I had the perfect scenario, which very rarely happens in life, I wouldn't have had an ROI, or a return on investment, until my early 70s. Now, dovetail the fact that we are in a demographic, Keynesian economic, central bank nightmare with group identity politics, basically going crazy in America where commerce almost doesn't even exist. For those of you who have heard me on radio shows and Vince's USAPrepared.com, you know I was diagnosed with spinal stenosis and nerve damage. I tried to get a part-time job share with GlaxoSmithKline. I was working full-time for 14 years. I had neurosurgeons writing them to reduce my driving by 50%, and Human Resources told me that part-time job shares were for females only. So I consulted with about 30 different attorneys throughout this period, and they said, as a poor/middle-class white male heterosexual with a Christian name, you have no rights, no restitution. One attorney told me I have a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning reverse discrimination lawsuit. One attorney told me, and this is one of my favorite lines that I try to use as often as possible, I don't have enough group self-pity points. So when you hear people say identity politics, they're masking the word group identity politics. When they talk about a divide and conquer strategy and they leave it there, they're purposely not talking about lowering the bars of standards and expectations. So the answer to 95% of the questions out there, for me, is the words, it depends. So when you live in a situation where, everything that made us great, like supply and demand, free markets, and hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications, has been thrown out the window with the baby in the bathwater. You got to look at it as it depends. It depends on your age. It depends on, and we're heading, I have absolutely no doubt about it, folks, we're heading into a deflationary spiral with stagflationary complications for the bottom 93%. And as I try to be repetitive on, interest rates are a function of growth, wages, and inflation. All three of those are going down because we have exported inflation to low-cost producing countries. And that's why bonds are, in my opinion, still in a bull market. Because interest rates should keep going down even though the Fed has been raising them. And you got to ask yourself, are they trying to crash the whole system? Because everything will come down. Housing, everything is dependent on interest rates right now. So that being said, I have an idea on how we can fix the economy, but this proves my point. It's so easy to fix, but the powers that be want to create and keep this status quo, which I call basically an incognito caste system. Not as obvious and deliberate as India, but nevertheless we have a caste system. Now, if we broke up all the big companies, all the oligarchies and monopolies, and the people decided how much net worth an individual corporation could have, and I'm not saying socialism, I'm saying in the context of the George Soroses and the Bezos and all the big corporations who are literally funding groups like Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and sedition and treason and espionage. You know, when you have this addiction to power, money, and control, and you try to control the planet, where 8 people now have a higher net worth than half of the globe, half of the planet Earth combined, you know, the people have to stand up and say, enough is enough. If we did the following, folks, negative interest rates, now bear with me, means testing, a 100-year mortgage, and take the mean household debt and give that amount to each home. And that could be done with vouchers to prevent hyperinflation and dismantle the central banks. And let me explain this. Negative interest rates, I realize that they're a fee, and it scares most people, but banks still have a huge spread on car loans and credit card loans. I mean, the average credit card loan from a bank is 14 to 16%, folks. Cars are 5%. Negative interest rates, if we did this, and let's say you did the right thing, and you took the plunge and took the risk to buy land, to buy a home, let's say we had 2% negative interest rates. The person who took out the loan gets paid by the bank at the end of the year that 2% for doing the right thing, for not defaulting, for not going to bankrupt. We are not rewarding the people for doing the right thing anymore because we've created a separate tiered system of different rules, laws, and accountability based on what group identity politics you have in order to lower the bars of standards and expectations, to insult, degrade, and disrespect, to avoid synergy, to create and manufacture all this perception and pity and guilt to keep lowering the bars of standards and expectations. And if we had means testing, where let's say the people decided, okay, let's say if you have less than $300,000 in the bank, you do not get confiscated from your wealth from a bank. Only the super rich gets the confiscation regarding the negative interest rates. And 100-year mortgages, right now, folks, they're doing 100-year bonds in certain countries. This is how desperate the big oligarchies are. And when I say the oligarchies, I mean the big governments who have created alliances with big corporate oligarchies. They're even issuing bonds to pay pensions. Certain big companies like even ExxonMobil, I've read articles where they're literally can't afford to pay their dividends on their stocks and they're borrowing money to do it. It's all unsustainable. This whole thing is ready to go down. So instead of having 100-year bonds for individual countries, we could have 100-year mortgages and give the people a shot to spread out their principal payments, okay, with low reward interest rates or negative interest rates that they could get money paid back and they can catch up. Give the people a chance to catch up. And if we took the mean household debt, let's say it was $80,000 around the country, and everybody got a voucher to either pay off debt. If you're in debt, you just go through a title company or a credit card company like you normally check your credit, and you get that voucher. And if you're in debt, you have to pay it off. If you're not out of debt, you must spend it within a certain amount of time. And if it was done in a voucher fashion, we wouldn't have a hyperinflationary situation. And while this is all happening, we dismantle the central banks. And instead of debt-based currency, we do it the way the Constitution was intended, where Congress prints the money, maybe instead of a Federal Reserve note, maybe a Treasury note. This can be discussed, and eliminate debt-based currency. If we did that, we could have prosperity again. But the powers that be, they're so addicted to power, money, and control, they want the aristocracy-serfdom relationship. Well, now the whole system is ready to come down. It's hanging by a thread. It's hanging at the edge of a cliff. And we need to, like Trump says, transfer the power back to the people. We have to be Americans again. This guy's taken $1 salary. He put his family's safety on the line. He has a chance to be General Maximus in the movie The Gladiator, the savior of the USA. But if he keeps kowtowing to all these multimillionaires and billionaires and keeps this status quo going, or caste system, there's going to be hell to pay. It's going to be very ugly in many different ways. And the elite have to start listening to the people when it comes to ideas and solutions. And that's one of the reasons I talk about these outside-the-box ideas solutions. Just with this idea I just shared, Vince, if the powers that be did that, we could get our country and our economy rolling in a matter of months.
Mm-hmm. And when we come back, Rich Scheben, would you tell us the benefits that you might see if we lowered the amount of government bureaucracy, as well as what you've just outlined, to get America going again?
You bet.
Another prong to the approach. We'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com, offgridmontana.com. Rich, you're talking about negative interest rates, and I mentioned reducing government bureaucracies as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it boils down to a lot of the barometers that the elites use, Vince, for the health of the economy. We can no longer use increased GDP as it being equivalent to happiness in a system that's so corrupt and manipulated. For example, it takes, you've heard that term Tina, the woman's name Tina, there is no alternative. It's usually revolving around interest rates and bubbles and popping. Basically, they raise interest rates too high, everything collapses. Stocks, bonds, housing, real estate, government, and commercial, retail, emerging markets. We can't pay the interest in our debt. I mean, it takes it's insane what's happening. It takes 4 times the amount of debt to create one time, or $4 to create $1 of increased GDP. We have to start thinking about the bottom 93%, because savings are directly proportional to goods and services and productivity, and not the printing of money, because 95% of that money goes to the top 1 to 7%. When Hank Paulson in 2008 printed all that money to save the housing bubble and basically pay off all the big banks and insurance companies and the auto manufacturers, etc., 95% of that money went to the top 1 to 7%, depending on what you read. So we need to start looking at different barometers and coming up with suggestions from the bottom 93%. Because silence, folks, equals consent. Do you remember that their whole plan, remember when I talked about this earlier, is to make you submissive and break your will. That means they're gonna continue to do everything. And we need to start talking objective facts in lieu of subjective emotional opinion. I mean, we're in a world of hurt, and not just U.S. economy, actually world economy. You look at 2016 global economy, it was $75 trillion. Well, the U.S., China, Japan, and Germany was approximately 52% of that. Well, those 4 countries, including us, the velocity of money is dropping like a rock. So what do you think is going to happen to the global economy? Supply and demand, free markets. It's going to become more fascist. See, we have a fascist system in America, folks. And pardon my repetition, but only 4 to 6% of Americans make their primary income from being self-employed. Fascism, again, is the big corporate oligarchies who create an alliance with big government. And people have to realize that. And there's so many groups, especially young people, being used. I don't care what skin pigmentation, what gender, what sexual orientation, ideology, philosophy, you're all being duped. And let me just give you one example of using objective facts, okay? And I've talked to quite a few liberals, whether it be on the radio or in a talk, and they all agree. You remember that chant? It was probably the leftist, Democrat, progressive, most popular chant. Trump, KKK, no fascist USA. First of all, folks, the liberals, I'm all for being liberal. But the liberals, the Democrats, the left, I don't care what you call them, they've been hijacked by the globalists, okay? To use us as groups so we infight and create chaos. That's how a divide and conquer strategy works. But let's just take that Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA chant and just break it down to its simplest form. First of all, KKK, folks, this was started by the Democrat Party. Most of the people in the hierarchy of those type of groups are usually FBI or CIA or NSA informants to create and foment the chaos because they have to have chaos and infighting for the divide and conquer strategy to work. Okay, Margaret Sanger, who was a huge Democrat, okay, liberal, progressive, whatever you want to call her, she literally created Planned Parenthood in 80% of the black neighborhoods because she said via audio, via transcript, via video, I've seen it, I've heard it, and I've read it, that we need to keep the black population down. Obama, double black unemployment. Folks, fascism, again, is what we have now. And Trump, what he's trying to do is give the people the control back, to create small businesses so we can control our own destiny. Vince?
Yeah, when we come back, I'd like to share with you something that's happening to me. I've decided to run for the board of directors of the Electrical Cooperative. And let me share with you what the stage is going to be like and some of the obstacles. So, Rich Scheben, next month, I'll be on stage at the Cowan Civic Center in Lebanon, Missouri. And that's where the meeting is held for the board of directors of this particular electrical cooperative. And the seating capacity of this 46,000 square foot facility, and that's the same facility that you've been in for the Get Prepared Expo, 46,000 square feet. If they put chairs in there, it'll easily seat 5,000 people. I've heard that as many as 8,000 have been in that room. So there are bleachers and chairs and a stage. So I'm going to be there, and my mission is to deliver a message that will show the members of the electrical cooperative why they should consider voting for Vincent Finelli. Now this is it's a fun thing. There's a live band. Everybody gets hot dogs, popcorn, sodas, potato chips, and it's air conditioned in the heat of the summer. So it's a free event, and a lot of people go. But my message is about safe, reliable, and affordable electricity. But during the annual board of directors meeting, prizes are given out. I'm talking about big prizes. I'm talking about huge televisions that take 2 people to carry them. Electronics. I mean, there are probably easily 50 prizes that are worth several $100s a piece. So it's a lot of fun, but I have a feeling that the people who attend this are there for the prizes and the hot dogs and the band. They don't really realize that the main purpose of their participation is to elect a board of directors through majority vote who will take into consideration the interests of the members. Affordable electricity, reliable electricity, and safe electricity. And also, they need to know about the potential failure points of the grid because, 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. We all know the answer to that. But I don't think they all know that. And so you talk about dividing and dumbing down and keeping people in the dark. The people, for the most part, who are going to be voting will not have heard of coronal mass ejections and things like that. They won't know about the things that we talk about here on the air. And so I have a quandary. How do I, in a few minutes, describe why they should be really careful about who they elect, rather than re-elect the same people over and over who have brought them smart meters and have brought them electrical rate increases. How do you do that? I don't know, because we've been divided and dumbed down for so long. What do you think? Do you have an answer?
Well, I can go off into a tangent, and keep in mind a lot of the disguises that the powers that be use are things like Agenda 21, words humanitarian, sustainable city, global warming, climate change. It's pretty obvious. Even Lagarde from the IMF talks about climate change in her speeches. Now, why is she's supposed to be a financial institution? Why is she talking about climate change? It's because it's all about the agenda. It's all about top-down control of the people. So what my suggestion would be is and I don't know if this will get you elected, if it's a fair election and the people are thinking outside the box, I think this will help you, but it all depends on how fixed the election is. I would start out with things of that nature and make people realize that it's not all about the bottom line. Remember what I said earlier, this is my analogy. Increased GDP is not equivalent to happiness, not anymore, not for the bottom 93%, not in a corrupt, manipulative society. So what I would suggest is you as a board member to give information to the people, whether it be for supplemental solar panels, possibly going off-grid, just maybe even having a once-a-month discussion or talk about being self-sufficient in many cases, from gardening to alternative energy, raising animals, whatever the case may be, to give people options so they can control their own destiny. And the more information they have, the better off they're going to be, because I think skill sets for what's coming down the pike financially, economically, socially, and politically, and that's one of the reasons I talk with that type of rationale for all four of those criteria as evenly as I possibly can. But if people really understood that, everything from being debt-free to maintaining skill sets, is college really worth it, creating time leverage in your assets instead of being in debt early in life. There's so many things, food storage. I mean, having a garden. Every American who listens to this show should have at least a little garden, because you don't just plant seeds. People say, I'm just going to plant seeds when things get rough. Well, most people don't even know to buy heirloom or open-pollinated seeds, so they can harvest the seeds for the following years to come if things get rough. We need to start relearning the old 19th century skills, but dovetailing them with 21st century technology, Vince.
Okay, I'm in total agreement with you. However, here's something that I've noticed with farming that I haven't had. I can't believe it. It's really upsetting to me. Farmers today shop at the food stores. They do. For the most part, they go to the Chinese factory outlet and they go to the super centers and they buy their food there, just like people in the suburbs do. And fewer and fewer farmers are raising gardens. I mean, there are a few, but fewer and fewer. And so they are becoming attached to the system. They can't seem to get away from it. And you're talking about growing gardens. We have a garden that's growing really, really well. It's doing fine. We expanded our garden. It's now easily 3 times the size it was last year. And it's been expanding every year. Well, I decided to grow 2 things. I bought some seeds from China on the internet to grow a tea plant. Okay, I want to raise tea leaves. They won't grow. I can't get them to germinate. I've tried 3 different ways. I cannot get them to germinate. And I bought some. I was having trouble buying pepperoncini. It's like an Italian pickled pepper. Mm-hmm. You might find them in salads at some restaurants. And I make Italian beef with them. Well, I want to buy them by the gallon. I can't find them. I can't find a good, reputable American brand in gallon jars here in our neck of the woods in Missouri. So no problem. I'll just grow my own. Well, the seeds won't germinate. And my son decided that he was going to try growing tobacco. Bought them on the internet. Seeds won't germinate. So either the Postal Service is destroying the seeds with radiation or scanning or something, but they're not growing. So now, if you just get an envelope with seeds in them that maybe is not packed, tightly in 3 or 4 layers of aluminum foil, we may not be able to get those seeds to grow. So here we have a situation where there are people who will say, and I've heard this at a meetup. There was a guy giving a presentation at one of our meetups years ago. He said, "Look, don't bother with the heirloom seeds. Start with the non-heirloom seeds, get some success, and then once you get success, then move to the heirloom seeds." And I'm saying, are you kidding? Start with the heirloom seeds. It's going to be really tough. However, you'll have them. You'll be able to save them because we don't know how much time we have left. So we're growing heirloom seeds. And now the yield is not as much designer looking as you might find in the supermarket or the Chinese factory outlet supercenter. You know, it's not all uniform, but the taste is there and it works, and we can save the seeds. But Rich, even most people are not like you, growing your own garden, raising your own food, hunting, fishing, you know, and being in charge and control of your own destiny. Most people are not. Most people don't live off the grid. Right now, the broadcast is this broadcast on my end and your end, both ends, are off the grid. We're generating electricity from the sun, and it's working great. You know, I've got some tweaking I have to do, but it's working. And more people ought to consider that. And why are we doing that? Because we don't want to be held hostage by the system. And what does that mean? That means that we want to have enough food to survive until we can grow our own. We want to have enough electricity to live and be able to do the things that we're trying to do. And it's working. But it takes effort. It takes not watching television. It takes, you know, not saying, I'm just going to relax some more. It actually takes reading, writing, arithmetic, using the skills that we've learned over the years, the skills that we are forgetting about. Learning how to estimate. Geez, young people don't know how to estimate. Just try asking them how far it is to a certain place, or ask them to give you directions on how to get there, from here to there. They have a tough time doing it. They'll pull out their phone. They'll pull out their phone to tell you how to get there because they don't know.
Yeah, and what's a scary statistic, and I've read this many times and said this on the air many times, the average American spends 7 to 8 hours on their television and smartphone daily. And it's not to learn financial, economic, social, and political benefits to share with the American people. It's mostly for entertainment. So for people, especially young people who say that they don't have the time, it's all a bunch of malarkey, because we are, especially for the young people, losing that balance in life between hard work and having free time to do the things we want to do, humor and being serious. But the biggest imbalance in life is the loss of nature and knowledge regarding technology in lieu of technology. You know, there's so many kids, you know, who knows how to operate a smartphone and text and things like that. But we've taught our youth how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct. And this is why they are in the situation that they are today regarding work ethic and a lack of knowledge of economy and finance and social and political skills. And this is why we need to have these discussions on the air. And if you were to try to be on this board member and you would say, I'm going to give seminars once a month to the people to think outside the box, everything from gardening and alternative energy, and just to make the people of that electric conglomerate happier and better off, increase the skill sets, I think you get the vote, Vince.
Well, that's what I'm gonna strive toward doing. And my mission is to protect the grid as best I can in the way that I can be beneficial. When we come back, would you share with us some of the things that people have said to you while you were traveling and speaking in Washington? OffGridMontana.com. Rich, you traveled to Washington, and you made some presentations in front of groups of people. What are they asking you? That's one of the things that I love about speaking publicly. I get a chance to talk to people after, listen to their questions. What are they concerned about? What are they saying? What do they think that's going right? What do they think that's going wrong?
Well, people who get to a conference like that know there's something very wrong. And my objective was to give ideas and solutions on how to prepare, ideas, suggestions, but mostly to wake people up regarding math, objective facts, and what's going on in the financial economic world. Let me just give you a few statistics since we're running out of time here. For example, I make it very clear that the central bank's goals, they have three main goals in my research. One is to save the banks. Two is to save the stock market / Wall Street. And three is to keep the status quo. In other words, to keep the status quo and the incognito caste system, as I refer to it. And I'll talk about things like, I'll use things that are very deja vu of what's happening in America today. For example, what started the Great Depression. Most people are not aware of this. There's four main things. I'll make this list very long, but there's four main things that really started the Great Depression. That was silver manipulation, increased interest rates, a Rothschild bank going down in Austria, and a decrease in money supply. So this is a chain reaction. And remember, collapse is a process, not an event. So when I talk about these four things, we have to ask ourselves one at a time. Is silver manipulation being done? Absolutely. Deutsche Bank and many banks from around the world has been caught with no consequences for manipulating silver. They're even admitting it. Okay, interest rates. Does the Fed want to increase interest rates? Absolutely. Have they been since Trump got elected? Absolutely. And you got to ask yourself, are they trying to collapse the system to reset it to whatever to hide all the corrupt monetary policies that's been done? It sure looks that way. How about the Rothschild Bank going down in Austria? Are banks going down around the Western world? Absolutely. Are most of them being propped up by the central banks from around the world because, excuse me, they're in cahoots with one another? Absolutely. I mean, just this first quarter alone, the Central Bank of Switzerland bought $80 billion worth of stocks and bonds from us. I mean, it's getting to be almost a comedy routine. And how about a decrease in money supply? Absolutely. They're talking about doing quantitative tightening, which is a contraction. It's opposite of quantitative easing. So that could be a supernova for the middle class. So everything that's happening, look at all loans, commercial, housing, auto, all down. You look at the 2-year and 10-year bond, the 10-year and 30-year bond. It's less than 100 basis points, 1% from each other. That signifies that the lenders can no longer make money by lending money. This is called a credit collapse. These are the things that I share with people from doing lots of reading and research to make people realize that this time will be different, okay? And we need to start thinking outside the box. We need to bring back the mentor-protege relationship. We need to have frugality, household corporations, big government. We need to live below our means, know the fine line between needs and wants. All city parks in urban, suburban America needs to be confiscated by the people to grow gardens. We need to start thinking outside the box. And that's one of the reasons I referred to that documentary I saw 10, 15 years ago in South L.A. It was a 14-acre piece where some rich fella donated this land to people. Well, the powers that be saw self-sufficiency and communication and synergy. They didn't like it. So they made the guy become an Indian giver, and he literally bulldozed all these people's beautiful garden. The elites don't want self-sufficiency. We need to start having these discussions about creating businesses on land and decentralizing America. Right now we have 90-10% ratio of people who live in urban, suburban versus rural. Back in the last Great Depression, it was 80-20 the opposite way. People had skill sets. They grew gardens. They hunted. They fished. They raised animals. They knew how to harvest edible and medicinal plants. They knew when clouds came in at night, it would warm the night air and not cool it down. They know how to find the North Star. We need to get those skill sets back, folks.
No question about it. And, class, if you happen to be in an airplane and you're flying over Phoenix, Arizona, for example, you look down on a big city and you think, okay, so everybody flushes their toilet multiple times a day. Where does it all go? Think about that.